Have you ever wanted to see a bully get exactly what they deserve? Imagine a man who owns the police and the politicians, interrupted at lunch by a crying child covered in dirt. The boy yells, "Your men put my mom in the hospital." Most drug lords would handle this with violence, but this boss handles it with a phone call that makes his own lieutenants shiver in fear. The air inside the restaurant was thick, heavy with the scent of roasted garlic, expensive cologne, and fear. This was La Hacienda, the finest establishment in Medellin, and right now it was completely silent. The only sound was the scraping of a silver knife against a porcelain plate. At the center table sat Don Ricardo. He did not look like a monster. He looked like a grandfather, wearing a white linen suit that cost more than most people in this city, made in a decade. He lifted a piece of steak to his mouth, chewed slowly, and swallowed. The waiter standing in the corner was trembling so hard that the water pitcher in his hand rattled against the glass. Everyone knew the rules. When Don Ricardo was eating, the world stopped. No phones, no loud noises, no interruptions. The peace was absolute. It was a silence bought with blood and maintained by the four men standing by the doors, their jackets bulging with the shape of automatic weapons. But then, the unthinkable happened. The heavy oak doors at the front of the restaurant burst open. It wasn't a rival gang. It wasn't the federal police. It was a child, a small boy, no older than 7, with hair matted by sweat and dirt, wearing a t-shirt that was 3 sizes too big and stained with something dark. The boy stood there, chest heaving, his small sneakers squeaking on the polished marble floor. The silence that followed was terrifying. The 4 bodyguards moved instantly. Their hands went inside their jackets, leather stretching as they gripped the handles of their pistols. The waiter dropped the pitcher. It shattered, shards of glass skittering across the floor like diamonds, but nobody looked at the mess. Every eye was on the boy. The head of security, a scarred man named Santos, stepped forward, his shadow falling over the trembling child. He reached out a massive hand to grab the boy by the collar, ready to drag him out into the alley and make sure he never made a mistake like this again. "Wait." The word was spoken softly, barely a whisper, but it stopped Santos dead in his tracks. Don Ricardo hadn't turned around. He hadn't even looked up from his plate. He simply raised one finger, the gold ring on his hand catching the light from the chandelier. Slowly, deliberately, Ricardo wiped his mouth with a silk napkin and placed it on the table. He swiveled his chair around. The leather creaked. The room felt like it was holding its breath. Ricardo looked at the boy. He didn't see a threat. He saw shaking knees. He saw tears cutting clean tracks through the grime on the boy's cheeks. He saw a terror so deep it made the child's lips tremble, yet the boy did not run. That interested him. Bravery in the face of death was rare, even among grown men. To see it in a child was a miracle. "Let him speak," Ricardo said, his voice deep and calm, like the rumble of distant thunder. Santos hesitated. "Patron, he's just a street rat. I will remove him." I said. Ricardo's eyes hardened, the warmth vanishing instantly. "Let him speak." Santos stepped back, bowing his head, retreating into the shadows. The path was clear. The boy stood alone in the center of the room, surrounded by men who killed for a living. He sniffled, wiping his nose on his arm. He looked at the wealthy man in the white suit, the man everyone whispered about in the streets, the man they called El Toro. The boy took a step forward, then another. He reached into his pocket. his small hand shaking violently, and pulled out something metallic. He threw it. It wasn't a weapon. It was a coin. It bounced off the tablecloth and spun to a stop next to Ricardo's wineglass. It was an old, distinctive gold coin, stamped with a crest that no longer existed. Ricardo stared at the coin. His heart skipped a beat. He knew that coin. He hadn't seen it in 6 years. The boy took a deep, ragged breath, his voice cracking as he screamed the words that would change everything. "Your men put my mom in the hospital." The accusation hung in the air. The bodyguards tensed up again, waiting for the order to silence the disrespect. "You did not accuse Don Ricardo. You did not shout at him." But Ricardo didn't order an execution. He felt a cold pit open in his stomach. He reached out and picked up the gold coin. The metal was warm from the boy's hand. Memories flooded back to him. 6 years ago. A failed ambush. A bullet in his side. He had bled out in an alleyway behind a clinic, dying in the rain. A nurse had found him. She hadn't called the police. She hadn't asked for money. She had stitched him up, given him antibiotics, and hidden him in her own car until his men could arrive. She had saved his life. When he tried to pay her, she refused. So he gave her this coin. He told her, "If you ever need me, if the world ever turns against you, show this to my men and you will be untouchable." And now, this boy, this child with the same dark, fierce eyes, was telling him that his men, the men sworn to his code, had hurt her. Ricardo stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. He walked around the table, ignoring his stunned guards, and knelt down on one knee in front of the boy. The expensive fabric of his suit trousers pressed into the glass shards from the broken pitcher, but he didn't care. He needed to be eye level with the child. He needed to see the truth. "What is your name, little one?" Ricardo asked, his voice dropping to a gentle, soothing tone that none of his men had ever heard before. "Mateo," the boy whispered, tears finally spilling over his eyelids. "My name is Mateo." "Mateo," Ricardo repeated. He reached out, his large, rough hand hovering for a moment before gently brushing a smudge of dirt from the boy's forehead. "Mateo, look at me. Who gave you this coin?" "My mama," Mateo sobbed. She told me if anything bad happened, find the man in the white suit. She said you were a good man. But you're not. You're a liar. The men who came, they wore your symbol. They had the bull tattoo on their necks. They smashed the shop. They hit her. They laughed when she fell." A tear rolled down Don Ricardo's cheek. It was a sight that would have terrified his enemies more than his anger. It was the tear of a man who realizes he has failed the only code that mattered. He had sworn that women and children were off limits. He had sworn to protect the innocent in his territory. And the woman who saved his life, the woman who had shown him mercy when he deserved none, was lying in a hospital bed because of his organization, because of his failure to control his dogs. The sadness in the room was suffocating. It was heavy and thick. Ricardo closed his eyes for a second, composing himself, pushing down the roaring fire of his rage and replacing it with a cold, calculated resolve. He opened his eyes. They were no longer the eyes of a grandfather. They were the eyes of a predator. "Mateo," Ricardo said softly, placing both hands on the boy's small shoulders. "I am going to tell you something, and I need you to believe me. I did not order this, but I am responsible for it, and I swear to you, on the life of my own mother and on the pain of your mother, I will fix it." Ricardo stood up. He lifted Mateo effortlessly into his arms, holding the boy against his chest. The child, exhausted and overwhelmed, buried his face in Ricardo's expensive suit, sobbing quietly. Ricardo turned to the room. The silence was different now. It wasn't respectful. It was terrified. His men saw the look on his face. It was the look of a reaper. Santos, Ricardo said. The name cracked like a whip. Yes, patron. Santos stepped forward, sweating profusely. Get the car. The armored SUV. Call the best surgeon in the city. Tell them to go to the hospital where this boy's mother is. I want her in a private wing. I want 20 men guarding the perimeter. If a fly lands on her, I will skin every single one of you alive. Do you understand? Yes, patron. Immediately. Santos scrambled for his radio. And Santos? Ricardo added, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. Find out which crew was collecting in the North District today. Find out who has the bull tattoo on their neck. Bring them to the warehouse. Do not tell them why. Just bring them. Ricardo walked out of the restaurant, carrying the boy. The humid air of the street hit them, but Ricardo felt nothing but the cold burn of vengeance. He stepped into the waiting black SUV, settling Mateo onto the leather seat beside him. The boy was shaking, looking at the tinted windows, looking at the scary men with guns. Are you going to hurt me too? Mateo asked, his voice barely audible over the hum of the engine. Ricardo looked at the boy. He reached into the mini fridge built into the car console and pulled out a cold bottle of soda and a chocolate bar. He opened them and handed them to the child. No, Mateo, Ricardo said, his voice heavy with a sadness that seemed to age him 10 years in a single moment. I am the monster that keeps other monsters away. And tonight, I am going to be the worst monster they have ever seen. Because nobody hurts the people I owe a debt to. The car pulled away from the curb, a convoy of black steel moving through the city like a funeral procession. Ricardo looked out the window at the passing streets. He saw the people, the vendors, the life of the city he claimed to rule. He realized that, while he sat in his ivory tower eating steak, rot had set into his kingdom. Men using his name to hurt the weak, men breaking the sacred laws. He looked back at Mateo, who was hungrily eating the chocolate, the sugar giving him a brief moment of comfort in the nightmare his day had become. Ricardo pulled out his phone. He dialed a number. It's me, he said into the receiver. Shut down the North District. Nobody goes in, nobody comes out. I'm looking for a crew of 4, new recruits, flashy, stupid. He paused, listening to the voice on the other end. Yes, I know who they are. They are dead men walking. They just don't know it yet. He hung up the phone. The car sped up, weaving through traffic. They were heading to the hospital first. He needed to see her. He needed to see the damage with his own eyes. He needed to apologize. And then he would go to work. The drive was quiet, but the tension inside the car was high enough to snap a wire. Mateo finished his chocolate and looked up at Ricardo. My mom. She looks like an angel when she sleeps, but today she looked broken. The words hit Ricardo like a physical blow. He clenched his jaw so hard his teeth ached. She will heal, Mateo. I promise you. Doctors can fix bones. They can fix skin. Can they fix fear? Mateo asked innocently. She was scared. She screamed your name, begging them to stop. She said, Don Diego wouldn't want this. And they just laughed and said, Don Diego is old. We are the new law. The temperature in the car seemed to drop 10 degrees. Don Diego is old. Ricardo repeated the words, tasting the bile in them. So that was it. Mutiny. Disrespect. They thought he was soft. They thought he was just a figurehead eating in fancy restaurants while they ran the streets. They had forgotten why he was called El Toro. They had forgotten the violence he was capable of. They are not the law, Ricardo said, staring straight ahead, his eyes fixed on the road. They are nothing, and by sunrise, they will be dust. The convoy screeched to a halt in front of the General Hospital. It was a rundown building, peeling paint, overcrowded waiting rooms. This was where the poor came to die. Ricardo felt a surge of shame. He had billions buried in the ground, billions in offshore accounts, and the woman who saved him was lying in this place. He opened the door before the driver could get out. He stepped onto the pavement, his white suit glowing under the streetlights. Security guards at the hospital entrance stepped forward to stop him, saw who it was, and immediately backed away, eyes wide with panic. The path opened up like the Red Sea. Ricardo didn't wait for his men. He walked through the automatic doors, Mateo trotting by his side, holding on to Ricardo's hand like a lifeline. The waiting room was chaotic. Crying babies, people bleeding, shouting nurses. But as Ricardo walked through, a hush fell over the crowd. The chaos died down. People recognized him. They pressed themselves against the walls, making way. A doctor in a sweat-stained scrub rushed over, looking terrified. "Don Ricardo," the doctor stammered. We didn't know you were coming. How can we serve you?" "Maria Elena Santos," Ricardo said. The name of the nurse burned into his memory. "Where is she?" She was just admitted to the emergency ward. Bed 4. It's bad, patron. Broken ribs, internal bleeding, concussion. Ricardo felt a tremor in his hand, the one holding Mateo's. He squeezed the boy's hand gently to reassure him, even though he himself wanted to punch a hole through the wall. "Move her," he ordered. "To the private suite on the top floor, the one I paid for last year. Call the specialist, Dr. Arango. Tell him if he isn't here in 10 minutes, I will burn his house down." Yes, of course. The doctor ran off, shouting orders at nurses. Ricardo knelt down again to Mateo. "Go with the nurses, Mateo. They will take you to your mother. She is going to be safe now. Nobody will touch her. Nobody will touch you." "Where are you going?" Mateo asked, his eyes wide. Ricardo stood up, smoothing the front of his jacket. He adjusted his cuffs. He looked at the reflection in the hospital window. He looked calm. But inside, a storm was raging. "I have to go to work," Ricardo said simply. "I have to go. Take out the trash." He turned and walked back toward the exit, his bodyguards falling in step behind him. As he exited the hospital, the cool night air felt good against his flushed skin. He climbed back into the SUV. The door slammed shut, sealing him in darkness. "To the warehouse," he commanded. The driver nodded. The engine roared. The time for sadness was over. Now it was time for the other thing. The thing he was best at. The thing that made grown men wake up screaming in the middle of the night. Don Ricardo was done eating lunch. Now the bull was loose. And the china shop was about to get destroyed. The tires of the armored SUV crunched over gravel and broken glass as the convoy pulled into the shipping yard. This was the darker side of the city, the place where the streetlights didn't work and the shadows stretched long and hungry across the cracked pavement. The warehouse loomed ahead, a massive skeleton of rusted steel and corrugated iron. Inside, the air would smell of diesel, dust, and old blood. It was a place where debts were settled, and right now the debt was high. Don Ricardo sat in the back seat, his eyes closed. He was visualizing the face of the boy, Mateo. He saw the terror in the child's eyes, the way his small hands had shaken when he held up that gold coin. It made a fire burn in Ricardo's chest, a slow, consuming heat that felt like swallowing hot coals. He took a deep breath, inhaling the conditioned air of the luxury car, trying to steady his heart rate. He needed to be cold. He needed to be ice. Anger made a man sloppy, but cold fury made a man precise. "We are here, patron," the driver said, his voice tight with nervousness. Even the driver knew that tonight was different. Tonight wasn't business, it was personal. "Open the door," Ricardo commanded. The door swung open. The humidity of the night hit him instantly, carrying the scent of the nearby river and the metallic tang of the industrial district. Ricardo stepped out. His white suit was a beacon in the gloom, a stark contrast to the black tactical gear of his bodyguards who swarmed around him in a protective diamond formation. They moved toward the small side door of the warehouse. The main bay doors were shut tight, sealing the screams inside. Two guards stood at the entrance, holding assault rifles across their chests. They straightened up instantly when they saw the boss, their faces pale. They opened the door without a word. Ricardo stepped across the threshold. The warehouse was cavernous, lit only by a few hanging halogen bulbs that cast a sickly yellow light over the concrete floor. In the center of the vast, empty space, 4 men were zip-tied to wooden chairs. They looked beaten, bruised, confused. These were the new recruits. They were young, barely in their 20s, wearing flashy designer jeans and gold chains that looked too heavy for their necks. They had the arrogance of youth, the kind of stupidity that comes from holding a gun for the first time and thinking it makes you a god. But right now, they didn't look like gods. They looked like frightened children. Santos was standing over them, holding a heavy leather strap. He looked up as Ricardo approached. "They are secured, Patron. They have been asking why they are here. They say there has been a mistake." Ricardo didn't answer. He walked slowly toward the 4 men. His footsteps echoed on the concrete. Click, clack, click, clack. The sound was rhythmic, like the ticking of a clock counting down their remaining seconds. He stopped 5 feet away from the center chair where the leader of the crew sat. The leader was a kid named Javi. Ricardo recognized him now. He was the nephew of one of his old lieutenants. Javi had a fresh tattoo on his neck, the charging bull, the symbol of the organization. The ink was still red and irritated around the edges. He looked up at Ricardo, sweat dripping from his forehead into his eyes. "Don Ricardo!" Javi shouted, his voice cracking. "What is this? Why are we tied up? We are your men. We are earners. We brought in 50,000 pesos just today from the North District." Ricardo stared at him. He didn't blink. He didn't speak. He just looked at the tattoo on Javi's neck. It was a symbol of strength, of protection. And this boy, this worm, had used it to terrify a single mother. 50,000 pesos. Ricardo finally spoke. His voice was soft, echoing strangely in the large room. It wasn't a shout. It was a conversation. "You think 50,000 pesos buys you the right to break my laws?" "Laws?" Javi sputtered, pulling against the plastic zip ties cutting into his wrists. "What laws? We were collecting. The woman, she didn't pay the protection fee. We had to teach a lesson. If we let one slide, they all stop paying. That is business. You taught us that. You said to be strong." Ricardo took a step closer. He could smell the fear on them. It smelled like sour milk. I taught you to be strong, Ricardo corrected him gently. I did not teach you to be cruel. There is a difference. A wolf is strong. A rabid dog is just dangerous. Ricardo signaled to Santos. Cut his right hand free. Patron? Santos looked confused. Do it. Santos pulled a knife and sliced the plastic tie, binding Javi's right wrist. Javi rubbed his wrist, looking wary, hope flickering in his eyes. Maybe this was a test? Maybe the old man was just scaring them? Stand up, Ricardo ordered. Javi stood up slowly, his legs shaking. He was taller than Ricardo, younger, more muscular, but he hunched his shoulders, making himself small. You feel big when you kick down a door of a woman's house? Ricardo asked, unbuttoning his suit jacket and handing it to Santos. He rolled up the sleeves of his pristine white shirt. You feel powerful when you hit a woman who is on her knees begging for mercy? When a little boy screams at you to stop? Javi's eyes darted around the room. The kid was in the way. We didn't mean to. The kid, Ricardo interrupted, his voice dropping an octave, vibrating with suppressed rage. Walked into my restaurant today. He threw a coin at me. He had more courage in his pinky finger than you have in your entire body. Ricardo stepped into Javi's personal space. You want to be a man? You want to be a fighter? Hit me. What? Javi blinked. Hit me, Ricardo roared, the sound exploding out of him like a cannon shot. The sudden noise made everyone in the room flinch. You like hitting people? Hit me. I am right here. I am not a nurse. I am not a child. I am El Toro. Hit me. Javi, driven by panic and instinct, swung. It was a clumsy, desperate punch aimed at Ricardo's jaw. Ricardo didn't even flinch. He caught Javi's fist in his open palm. The smack of flesh against flesh was loud and sharp. Ricardo's grip tightened, crushing the younger man's hand. Javi screamed as the bones ground together. Ricardo didn't let go. He twisted the arm, stepping in, and drove his other fist into Javi's stomach. The air left the boy's lungs with a wet gasp. Javi doubled over, but Ricardo held him up by the crushed hand. She was defenseless, Ricardo shouted, driving a knee into Javi's nose. Blood sprayed across Ricardo's white shirt, a stark, violent red on the snowy fabric. She saved my life, and you broke her ribs. Ricardo threw Javi to the ground. The boy curled into a ball, sobbing, blood bubbling from his nose. The other three men bound to the chairs were weeping now, begging, praying to saints they hadn't thought about in years. Ricardo stood over Javi, breathing heavily. He looked at his knuckles. They were split. He felt the pain, and it felt good. It felt like penance, but it wasn't enough. He turned to the other three. Who touched the child? Silence. The only sound was the buzzing of the halogen lights and Javi's wet whimpering on the floor. I will ask one time, Ricardo said, walking over to a metal table where Santos had laid out a variety of tools. He didn't pick up a hammer or a plier. He picked up a towel. He wiped the blood from his hands slowly, methodically. If nobody answers, you all pay the price for the guilty one. Who touched the child? It was him! One of the bound men screamed, jerking his head toward the man on the far left. It was Marco. He pushed the kid. He kicked him when he tried to help his mom. I swear, I just watched the door. Ricardo looked at Marco. Marco was shaking his head violently, tears streaming down his face. No, Patron. I pushed him away so he wouldn't get hurt. I didn't mean it. Ricardo walked over to Marco. He looked into the young man's eyes. He saw the lie there. He saw the cruelty that tried to hide behind fear. "You pushed a 7-year-old boy," Ricardo said, his voice sounding incredibly tired. "You kicked him." Ricardo turned to Santos. "Strip them of their patches. Use a knife. Cut the tattoos off if you have to. They are not part of this family. They are not Cartel. They are common thieves." The scream that ripped through the warehouse as the reality set in was worse than the physical pain. To be stripped of the patch was a death sentence. It meant no protection. It meant they were fair game for every rival, every cop, every enemy they had ever made. "Patron, please," Javi gargled from the floor, spitting blood. "Please, just kill us. Don't cast us out. Just put a bullet in my head." Ricardo looked down at him with cold, dead eyes. "A bullet is quick. A bullet is mercy. You showed no mercy to Maria. Why should I show it to you?" Ricardo turned his back on them. "Santos, finish it. Break their hands so they can never hold a gun again. Then, dump them in front of the police station with a sign around their necks that says, 'Woman beaters, let the law have them.' In prison, they will find out what happens to men who hurt children." Ricardo walked toward the door. The sounds behind him, the dull thuds of metal on bone, the wet screams, did not make him flinch. He walked out into the night air. He felt dirty. He looked down at his shirt. The blood stain was drying, turning a rusty brown. He couldn't go back to the hospital looking like this. He couldn't let Mateo see him covered in the blood of the men who had hurt his mother. It would scare the boy. "Driver," Ricardo said as he approached the car, "open the trunk. I have a spare shirt in the emergency kit." He changed right there in the parking lot, stripping off the expensive, ruined shirt and putting on a fresh black one. He used a bottle of water to wash his face and hands, scrubbing until his skin was raw. He needed to be clean. He needed to be the grandfather, not the monster. He got back into the car, back to the hospital. The drive back was slower. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a deep, aching exhaustion. Ricardo rubbed his temples. He was getting too old for this. The violence, it used to excite him. Now, it just felt like work. It felt like taking out the trash. His phone buzzed. It was Dr. Arango, the specialist. "Patron." The doctor's voice was trembling. "Tell me," Ricardo said, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Is she is stable," the doctor said, and Ricardo let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "We had to remove her spleen, and she has 3 fractured ribs and a severe concussion. But she is strong. She is waking up. She is asking for her son. I am bringing him to her," Ricardo said. "Does she know? Does she know who paid for the room?" "No," the doctor hesitated. "She is confused. She keeps saying she needs to find the man with the coin." Ricardo closed his eyes. "I will be there in 10 minutes." He hung up. He looked out the window. The city was waking up. The sun was just beginning to crack the horizon, painting the sky in shades of purple and bruised orange. It was a new day. When the car pulled up to the hospital, the atmosphere was different. The night shift was leaving, the day shift arriving. The world was moving on, unaware of the violence that had just happened in the warehouse, unaware of the tragedy in the private suite on the 4th floor. Ricardo walked into the lobby. His guards fanned out, but he waved them off. "Stay here. I go up alone." He took the elevator. The metal box hummed as it ascended. He watched the numbers tick up. 1, 2, 3, 4. The doors opened. The private wing was quiet. The floor was carpeted, muffling his footsteps. He walked down the hallway to room 402. The door was slightly ajar. He pushed it open gently. Inside, the room was dimly lit. The machines beeped rhythmically. Beep, beep, beep. A soothing sound. In the bed, Maria looked small. Her face was swollen, purple bruising blooming across her cheekbone. Her arm was in a cast, but she was awake. Her eyes were open, groggy, scanning the room. And there, curled up in the uncomfortable plastic chair next to the bed, was Mateo. He was asleep, his small hand clutching the bedsheet, holding on to his mother even in his dreams. Ricardo stood in the doorway, watching them. This was the cost of his business. This was the collateral damage. He felt a lump in his throat. He wanted to leave. He wanted to run away and never look at them again, because looking at them made him feel guilty. But he couldn't. He owed a debt. Maria turned her head. She saw him. Her eyes widened. She tried to sit up, but winced in pain. "You!" she rasped, her voice dry and cracked. Ricardo stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "Do not move, Maria, please." "You are the man," she whispered. "The man from the alley. The man with the hole in his side." "I am," Ricardo said softly. He walked to the foot of the bed. He didn't come closer. He felt he didn't have the right to be close to them. "I am the man whose men did this to you." Maria looked at him, confusion warring with recognition. "Your men." "I am sorry," Ricardo said, and for the first time in 20 years, the apology was genuine. It wasn't a negotiation tactic, it was the truth. "I did not order it, but they were my dogs, and I let the leash get too loose. I have handled it. They will never hurt anyone again." Maria looked at Mateo, sleeping in the chair. She reached out and stroked the boy's hair. "He told me," she whispered. "He told me he went to find the king. He said the king would save us." "He is a brave boy," Ricardo said. "He has the heart of a lion. You raised him well." Maria looked back at Ricardo. Her eyes were filled with tears, but not fear. She saw the regret in his posture. She saw the way he held his hat in his hands, twisting the brim. "Why are you here?" she asked. "To make sure you are safe," Ricardo said, "and to tell you that from this day forward, your debt is paid. You saved my life once. Today, I failed to protect yours. I cannot undo the pain, but I can promise you this. You will never worry about money again. You will never worry about safety again. This hospital, I will buy it if I have to, just to make sure you get the best care." Maria managed a weak smile. It distorted her bruised face, but it was beautiful. "I don't need a hospital, Don Ricardo. I just need my son to grow up safe. I don't want him to be part of this world. Your world." Ricardo nodded solemnly. "He won't be. I will make sure of it. He will go to the best schools. He will become a doctor, a lawyer, an architect. He will build things, not destroy them." Suddenly, Mateo stirred. The boy sat up, rubbing his eyes. He looked at his mom. Then he saw Ricardo, standing in the shadows. "You came back," Mateo said, his voice sleepy but excited. "I told you I would," Ricardo said, stepping into the light. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the gold coin. He walked over and placed it gently on the bedside table next to Maria's hand. "I am returning this. Keep it. But you will never need to use it again. My face, my word, is your protection now." Mateo looked at his mom. "Mom, he beat up the bad guys. He told me he was a monster, but a good monster, like the Hulk." Maria laughed, a wheezing, painful sound. A good monster, she repeated. Rest now, Ricardo said, backing toward the door. I will have men outside. Good men. Men I trust with my own life. Sleep. He turned to leave, his hand on the doorknob. Wait, Mateo said. Ricardo stopped. Are you going to eat lunch with us? Mateo asked innocently. You didn't finish your steak. Ricardo paused. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Maybe another time, Mateo, when your mother is better. We will have the biggest steak in the city. He walked out into the hallway. The door clicked shut. The silence of the hospital corridor wrapped around him. He felt lighter. The rage was gone, replaced by a sense of purpose. He had fixed the mistake. He had balanced the scales. But as he walked toward the elevator, his phone rang again. He looked at the screen. Unknown number. Ricardo frowned. Only 5 people had this number. He answered it. Speak. Don Ricardo. A voice hissed on the other end. It was a voice he didn't recognize. It was digital, distorted, metallic. You made a mess in the warehouse tonight. You hurt my investments. Ricardo stopped walking. His grip on the phone tightened. Who is this? The men you broke. They were working for you, yes. But they were reporting to me. You just destroyed a very expensive operation, old man. I don't care who you are, Ricardo said, his voice dropping to that lethal whisper again. If you touch that family, if you even look at that hospital. Oh, I'm not looking at the hospital. The voice laughed, a cold, mechanical sound. I'm looking at your house, the one where your daughter sleeps. You like to protect children? Let's see if you can protect your own. The line went dead. Ricardo stood frozen in the hallway. The blood drained from his face. His daughter, Sophia. She was at the estate. It was supposed to be a fortress. He started to run. He didn't walk. He ran toward the elevators, shouting into his radio. Santos! Santos, get the car! Now, call the estate. Lock it down! Lock it down! The peace was over. The war had just begun. And this time, the enemy wasn't a clumsy recruit. It was a ghost. The phone in Don Ricardo's hand felt like a live grenade. The line was dead, but the mechanical laughter of the ghost still echoed in his ear. I'm looking at your house, the one where your daughter sleeps. Ricardo didn't put the phone in his pocket. He crushed it. He squeezed his hand so hard the screen shattered, glass digging into his palm, but he didn't feel it. He sprinted through the hospital's sliding doors, moving with a speed that defied his 60 years. His bodyguards, usually stoic statues of intimidation, were scrambling to keep up. They had seen the boss angry before. They had seen him violent, but they had never seen him panicked. Panic in a predator is the most dangerous thing in the world, because a panicked predator attacks everything in its path. Drive! Ricardo roared as he threw himself into the back of the armored SUV. Drive or I will kill you myself. The driver didn't ask questions. He didn't check for traffic. He stomped on the accelerator, and the heavy vehicle surged forward, tires smoking against the asphalt. The V8 engine screamed, a mechanical beast waking up to hunt. The convoy formed up, 3 black SUVs tearing through the morning traffic of Medellin, running red lights, forcing buses onto sidewalks. Horns blared, people shouted, but the black wave of steel didn't slow down. Ricardo sat in the back, gripping the leather handle above the door until his knuckles turned white. He closed his eyes. Sophia. He pictured her. 18 years old. She was supposed to be at university in London, safe, away from his rot. But she had come home for the summer. She wanted to surprise him. She wanted to have breakfast with her papa. And because of his arrogance, because he was busy playing the hero for a stranger's son, he had left his own daughter vulnerable. "Radio the house," Ricardo barked at Santos, who was sitting in the front passenger seat, loading an assault rifle with trembling hands. "Why are they not answering?" "I am trying, patron," Santos shouted over the roar of the engine and the sirens wailing in the distance. "The line is busy. Or cut. I'm getting nothing but static." "Try the panic room," Ricardo ordered. "If the perimeter is breached, the protocol is the panic room. Try the hard line." Santos dialed again. He held the receiver to his ear. His face went pale. He lowered the radio slowly. "What?" Ricardo asked, his voice barely a whisper. "It's ringing out, Patron. Nobody's picking up inside the panic room." Ricardo felt his heart stop. The panic room had a separate line, buried underground. If nobody answered, it meant one of two things. Either Sophia wasn't in there, or the people inside were already dead. "Faster," Ricardo said. "Patron, we are doing 140, the driver said, his eyes wide in the rear-view mirror. "Faster!" Ricardo screamed, slamming his fist into the back of the driver's seat. The city blurred outside the window. Buildings turned into streaks of color. The convoy reached the outskirts of the city, winding up the mountain roads toward the exclusive estate district. This was where the drug lords, the politicians, and the oil tycoons lived. It was supposed to be the safest square mile in Colombia. Private security patrols, checkpoints, cameras everywhere. But as they rounded the final bend toward the gates of La Fortaleza, Ricardo's estate, they saw the smoke. Thick black smoke was rising into the morning sky. It wasn't coming from the house. It was coming from the guard shack at the main gate. "Ram it!" Ricardo ordered. The SUV didn't slow down. The heavy steel bumper smashed through the wrought iron gates, tearing them off their hinges with a screech of tearing metal that sounded like a dying animal. The SUV skidded on the gravel driveway, fishtailing before straightening out. The scene inside the walls was a nightmare. The manicured lawns, usually green and perfect, were torn up by tire tracks. Bodies lay on the grass. Ricardo recognized them. His men. His perimeter guard. They weren't just shot. They were executed. This wasn't a gang hit. This was a paramilitary operation. The attackers had used suppressors and precision tactics. They had moved through the outer defenses like ghosts. The convoy screeched to a halt in front of the massive mahogany front doors of the mansion. The doors were blown open, hanging loosely from the frame. Splinters of wood littered the marble steps. Ricardo was out of the car before it fully stopped. He didn't wait for his bodyguards to form a shield. He snatched a handgun from the holster of the nearest dead guard on the driveway, a heavy .45 caliber pistol, and charged up the stairs. "Sophia!" he screamed. "Sophia!" His voice echoed in the grand foyer. The house was silent, the eerie, terrifying silence of a graveyard. The chandelier above swung gently, tinkling in the draft coming from the broken door. There were bullet holes in the expensive paintings. A vase from the Ming Dynasty lay shattered on the floor. Santos and the other guards rushed in behind him, weapons raised, sweeping the corners. "Clear left! Clear right!" "The bedroom," Ricardo gasped, his chest heaving. "She sleeps late. The master suite on the east wing." He ran up the grand staircase, taking the steps 2 at a time. His knees burned, his lungs burned, but adrenaline pushed him forward. He reached the landing and turned right, sprinting down the long hallway lined with family portraits. Pictures of Sophia as a baby, Sophia at her communion, Sophia graduating high school. Every picture mocked him. You built this fortress to keep the world out, the walls seemed to whisper, but you let the devil in. He reached her door. It was closed. He didn't knock. He kicked it open, raising the gun, ready to fire at anything that moved. The room was empty. The bed was unmade, sheets tangled. A lamp was knocked over, but there was no blood. Sophia! Ricardo checked the bathroom. Empty. He checked the walk-in closet. Empty. Patron! Santos shouted from the hallway. In here! The library! Ricardo spun around and ran back down the hall. The library was his office, his sanctuary. It was where he made the deals that ran the country. He burst into the room. The scene froze him. 3 men dressed in black tactical gear, wearing balaclavas, were standing in the center of the room. They were not looking at Ricardo. They were looking at the floor behind the heavy oak desk. One of the men was holding a girl by her hair. Sophia. She was on her knees, wearing her silk pajamas, terrified, tears streaming down her face. The man had a knife pressed against her throat, a serrated combat knife. He saw Ricardo enter and smiled beneath the mask. His eyes were cold, dead things. "Drop the gun, old man," the man said. His accent was foreign. "Russian? Israeli? Mercenary. Drop it, or I open her up like a zipper." Ricardo froze. The gun in his hand felt heavy. His bodyguards crowded the doorway behind him, rifles raised, lasers dancing on the chests of the intruders. "Take the shot," Santos whispered in Ricardo's ear. "I have the angle." "No," Ricardo hissed. "If he twitches, she dies." Ricardo looked at the man holding his daughter. He looked at Sophia. Her eyes locked with his. "Papa," she mouthed. She was shaking so hard the knife was vibrating against her skin, drawing a tiny bead of blood that trickled down her neck. "What do you want?" Ricardo asked, his voice steady, though his soul was screaming. "Money? I have $10 million in the safe in the floor. Take it. Leave her." The mercenary laughed. "We didn't come for your money, El Toro. We were paid to deliver a message. The ghost says hello." "Who is the ghost?" Ricardo demanded, taking a slow step forward. "Tell me, and I will let you live." "You are in no position to negotiate." The mercenary sneered. "You went soft, Ricardo. You helped a peasant boy and ignored your own kingdom. Weakness invites wolves." The mercenary shifted his grip on the knife. "We are going to leave now, and we are taking the girl as insurance. If you follow us, we send her back to you in pieces, 1 finger a day." "No," Ricardo said. "What?" The mercenary blinked. "I said no," Ricardo repeated. He wasn't looking at the mercenary anymore. He was looking at Sophia. He gave her a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. A signal. Duck. It was a game they used to play when she was little. When they played hide and seek. When he nodded, she would drop to the floor and roll. He prayed she remembered. He prayed the fear hadn't erased her memory. Sophia saw the nod. She squeezed her eyes shut. "Now!" Ricardo screamed. Sophia dropped her body weight, going limp. The sudden movement surprised the mercenary. His grip on her hair slipped. She hit the floor. In that split second, the top of the mercenary's head was exposed. Bang! The shot was deafening in the enclosed room. Ricardo didn't hesitate. He fired a single round from the .45. The bullet struck the mercenary right between the eyes. His head snapped back, red mist spraying the bookshelves behind him. He crumpled to the ground, the knife clattering uselessly on the hardwood floor. "Kill them!" Ricardo roared. The room erupted in gunfire. The other 2 mercenaries raised their submachine, guns. but they were too slow. Santos and the bodyguards unleashed a wall of lead. The library was torn apart. Books exploded into confetti. Wood splintered. The remaining two intruders danced the puppet dance of death as dozens of bullets ripped through their body armor. They hit the floor before they could pull a trigger. Silence returned to the room, ringing in their ears. The air was thick with the smell of gunpowder and drywall dust. Ricardo dropped the gun. He didn't care about the bodies. He scrambled over the desk, falling to his knees beside his daughter. "Sophia! Sophia! Look at me!" He grabbed her face, checking her neck. The cut was shallow. A scratch. She threw her arms around his neck, sobbing uncontrollably. "Papa! They were waiting! They were in the house when I woke up!" Ricardo held her tight, rocking her back and forth. He buried his face in her hair. He was shaking now. The adrenaline was crashing, leaving him weak. He felt tears stinging his eyes. He had almost lost her. He had come within 1 inch of losing the only thing that made his life worth living. "I have you," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I have you. I will never let you go. I swear." He looked up at Santos. "Secure the house. Check the bodies. I want to know who they are. I want to know who sent them. Strip them naked if you have to. Find me a phone, a frequency, a name. Find me something." Santos nodded, his face grim. He began searching the pockets of the dead mercenary leader. Ricardo helped Sophia stand up. She was barefoot, shivering. He took off his jacket, the black one he had changed into at the warehouse, and draped it over her shoulders. It was too big for her, swallowing her small frame. It smelled of his cologne and the faint, metallic scent of the gun he had fired. "Come," he said gently. "We are leaving. This house is not safe." "Where are we going?" Sophia asked, wiping her eyes. "To the bunker," Ricardo said. "In the mountains." "Patron," Santos called out from the other side of the room. He was holding a small black device. It wasn't a standard phone. It was a satellite encrypted communicator. "I found this on the leader. It has one message in the outbox, sent 5 minutes ago." "Read it," Ricardo commanded. Santos looked at the screen. He hesitated. It says, "The distraction worked. The bull is at the hospital. We have the calf." Ricardo felt a chill go down his spine that was colder than death. The distraction worked. The attack on the boy's mother, the little boy screaming in the restaurant. It wasn't just a rogue crew being stupid. It wasn't an accident. It was a setup. The enemy knew Ricardo. They knew his code. They knew that if they hurt a mother and child in his territory, he would react. He would go to the hospital. He would be emotional. He would be distracted. And while he was playing the hero, pretending to be a savior, he had left his own back door open. Javi, the recruit he had beaten in the arts warehouse, wasn't just a thug. He was a pawn. He had been paid to beat that woman. He had been paid to draw Ricardo out. Ricardo felt sick. He had walked right into the trap. His morality, the one thing he prided himself on, had been weaponized against him. "They played me," Ricardo whispered, the realization landing like a physical blow. "They used the boy to get to me." He looked at Sophia. If he had been 5 minutes slower, if the traffic had been worse, she would be gone. And it would have been his fault. "Patron," Santos said. "There is a coordinates tag attached to the message. It's a reply, incoming." "What does it say?" "It says, 'Bring her to the extraction point. The buyer is waiting.'" "The buyer?" Ricardo frowned. "This isn't a hit. It's a kidnapping. They wanted to sell her?" Or leverage her, Santos said. Who has enough money to hire a team like this? Ricardo walked over and took the device. He looked at the coordinates. He recognized them. It was an old airfield deep in the jungle, about 50 miles south. It was a smuggling strip used by the cartels in the 80s, now abandoned. They are waiting for a delivery, Ricardo said, a dark, terrible idea forming in his mind. They are waiting for the girl. He looked at the dead bodies on the floor. He looked at their gear. Black masks, black tactical vests, anonymous. Santos, Ricardo said, his voice shifting. The panic was gone. The grandfather was gone. El Toro was back, and he was angrier than he had ever been in his life. How many men do we have left? The B team is arriving now, 20 men, heavy weapons. Good, Ricardo said. Fit them up. Fit them up? Santos asked. Put them in the gear. Ricardo pointed to the dead mercenaries. Put on the masks. Put on the vests. Take their vehicle. Sophia stared at him. Papa, what are you doing? Ricardo turned to her. He cupped her cheek. I am going to finish this, Mihaicha. They are waiting for a delivery. I am going to give them one. He turned back to Santos. We are going to the airfield. We are going to pretend to be this team. We are going to drive right up to the buyer. And when we get close enough to see the whites of his eyes, Ricardo picked up the bloody combat knife from the floor. He wiped it on his pant leg. We are going to show him that he didn't catch a calf. He caught the bull. But, patron, Santos warned, if we walk into a trap, if they realize it's not them, they won't realize, Ricardo said, his eyes burning with a cold blue fire. Because I am bringing the package. Santos's eyes widened. You cannot mean... Sophia comes with us, Ricardo said. Papa, Sophia gasped. No. Santos stepped forward, breaking protocol. Absolutely not. It is suicide. She's safe now. You cannot use her as bait. She is not bait, Ricardo said, his voice low and hard. She is the Trojan horse. They expect a scared girl. They expect a victim. They do not know she is my daughter. He turned to Sophia. Can you shoot? Sophia looked at the dead men. She looked at her father. She swallowed hard. She wiped the last tear from her cheek. She stood up straighter. She pulled the oversized jacket tighter around herself. You taught me, she said softly. On the ranch, when I was 12. Good, Ricardo said. He reached into his waistband and pulled out a spare pistol. A small, compact Glock. He checked the chamber and handed it to her. Put this in your pocket. Keep your hand on it. Do not take it out until I say the word. And what is the word? Sophia asked, gripping the cold metal. Ricardo looked at the carnage in his library. He looked at the shattered picture frames of his family. The word, Ricardo said, is mercy. Mercy? Sophia asked, confused. Yes, Ricardo grinned, but there was no humor in it. It was a wolf's grin. Because when I shout mercy, that is the signal that we are all out of it. He walked toward the door, stepping over the body of the man who had held a knife to his daughter's throat. Let's go, Ricardo commanded. The ghost wants a meeting. Let's not keep him waiting. As they walked out of the ruined mansion, the sun was fully up. The birds were singing. It was a beautiful day, a perfect day for a war. Ricardo got back into the SUV, but this time he didn't sit back. He sat forward. He checked his magazines. He checked his knife. He thought about Mateo, the little boy in the hospital. He thought about Maria. He had saved them. He had done the right thing, and the universe had punished him for it. So be it, Ricardo thought, as the convoy roared back to life, heading for the jungle. If doing good gets my family hurt, then I will be bad. I will be worse than bad. I will be a nightmare. The ghost thought he was playing chess. He thought he had removed the queen from the board. He didn't realize that the king had just decided to burn the whole board down. The road to the jungle was long and winding. Ricardo spent the drive in silence, holding Sophia's hand. He was squeezing it, grounding himself. He needed to remember what he was fighting for. Not money, not power, not territory, family, and for family, he would set the world on fire. The jungle was alive. It didn't care about money or drugs or power. It only cared about survival. The abandoned airfield cut a scar through the dense green canopy, a strip of cracked concrete baking under the relentless midday sun. Heat shimmered off the runway, distorting the air, making the private jet parked at the far end look like a mirage. It was a sleek Gulf Stream, painted matte black, engines whining with a high-pitched scream that frightened the birds into silence. Don Ricardo sat in the driver's seat of the lead SUV. He was sweating, but not from the heat. He was wearing the tactical vest and balaclava of the man he had killed in his library. The fabric scratched his face. It smelled of stale sweat and copper. Next to him, Santos was doing a final weapons check, racking the slide of a submachine gun. In the back seat, Sophia sat perfectly still. She had her hands zip-tied in front of her, but the plastic tie was loose, cut halfway through with a razor blade so she could snap it with a single hard tug. "We are 2 minutes out," Ricardo said, his voice muffled by the mask. "Remember the plan. No heroics. Wait for the signal." "I'm ready, Papa," Sophia whispered. Her voice was shaking, but her eyes were dry. She looked out the window at the wall of green trees. "They won't see it coming." "They think they are buying a victim," Ricardo growled, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. "They don't know they are importing a bomb." The convoy rolled onto the tarmac. There were 3 vehicles in total: Ricardo's SUV and 2 trucks filled with his best men, all dressed in the stolen gear of the mercenaries. Ahead of them, a reception committee was waiting by the jet. 6 men with assault rifles stood in a semicircle. In the center stood a man in a white linen suit, wearing sunglasses, looking at his watch. Ricardo recognized him instantly. It wasn't a ghost. It was flesh and blood. It was Alejandro the architect Velázquez, a rival from the coast, a man who treated the drug trade like a tech startup, who called Ricardo a dinosaur because Ricardo still believed in things like loyalty and territory. Alejandro believed only in efficiency. "It's Velázquez," Ricardo said to Santos. "Of course. The math adds up. He wanted to distract me so he could take my daughter and force me to abdicate." "He is a dead man," Santos said flatly. "Not yet," Ricardo cautioned. "Get us close." The SUV rolled to a stop 20 yards from the jet. Ricardo killed the engine. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the whine of the jet turbines. Ricardo opened his door and stepped out. He kept his head down, playing the role of the hired gun. He walked to the back door and opened it, grabbing Sophia by the arm. He pulled her out roughly, too roughly. He hoped she understood it was an act. She stumbled, falling to her knees on the hot concrete. "Get up!" Ricardo barked, disguising his voice with a guttural rasp. Sophia stood up, feigning terror. She whimpered, looking toward Velázquez. Velázquez smiled. It was a shark smile, all teeth and no warmth. He walked forward, flanked by 2 of his guards. He stopped 10 feet away. "You're late," Velázquez said, his voice smooth and arrogant. I pay for precision, not scenic drives through the jungle." Ricardo didn't speak. He just shoved Sophia forward. She stumbled toward Velasquez. "Ah, the princess," Velasquez said, looking Sophia up and down. "Your father loves you very much. It is his greatest weakness. He's probably running around his empty mansion right now, crying into his whiskey. It is pathetic. The old ways are dead. Sentiment is a liability." Ricardo felt a vein throb in his temple. He wanted to draw his weapon right then and there. He wanted to wipe that smug look off Velasquez's face. But not yet. The other guards were too far away. He needed them closer. "Is the transfer complete?" Ricardo asked, keeping his voice low. "The money is in the account," Velasquez said, waving a hand dismissively. "5 million for the job. Another 5 when I am wheels up. You mercenaries. You have no vision. You just want the cash." Velasquez reached out and grabbed Sophia's chin, forcing her to look at him. "Don't worry, sweetheart. I'm not going to hurt you. Not if your father signs the papers, giving me the North District. You are just leverage." Sophia looked him dead in the eye. She stopped whimpering. "My father doesn't sign papers," she said, her voice clear and strong. "He signs death warrants." Velasquez laughed. "Spirited. I like that. But your father is a relic. He spent all morning saving a peasant boy in a hospital because of some outdated code of honor. He doesn't understand that in this world, you either eat or you are eaten." Velasquez turned to his guards. "Load her onto the plane." One of the guards stepped forward to grab Sophia. He put his hand on her shoulder. This was it. The moment the world held its breath. Ricardo looked at Santos. He looked at his men in the trucks. He looked at his daughter. "Wait," Ricardo said. Velasquez stopped. He turned around, annoyed. "What is it now? You want a tip?" Ricardo reached up. Slowly, deliberately, he pulled the black balaclava off his head. The fabric slid away, revealing his face. His silver hair was matted with sweat. His eyes were burning with a cold blue fire. Velasquez's eyes went wide behind his sunglasses. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. It was as if he was looking at a dead man walking. "I don't want a tip," Ricardo said, his voice thundering across the tarmac. "I want to teach you a lesson about the old ways." "Kill him!" Velasquez screamed, stumbling back. "Kill them all!" "Sophia!" Ricardo shouted. "Mercy!" The word hung in the air for a fraction of a second. Snap! Sophia ripped her hands apart, breaking the weakened zip tie. Her hand dove into the pocket of the oversized jacket. In one fluid motion, she pulled out the Glock. She didn't hesitate. She jammed the barrel into the stomach of the guard reaching for her and pulled the trigger. Pop, pop. 2 muffled shots. The guard folded like a wet towel. At the same instant, the airfield erupted. Ricardo drew his weapons, 2 heavy pistols he had concealed in his vest. He didn't seek cover. He walked forward, firing with terrifying precision. Bang, bang, bang. The guard to Velasquez's right dropped, a hole in his forehead. Santos and the men in the trucks opened fire. The sound was deafening. A chaotic symphony of automatic gunfire that drowned out the jet engines. The glass of the SUVs shattered. Velasquez's men were caught completely off guard. They were expecting a transaction. They got a massacre. They scrambled for cover, firing blindly, but they were outgunned and outmaneuvered. Velasquez scrambled backward, falling over his own feet. He crawled on his hands and knees towards the plane stairs, screaming for his pilot to take off. "No, you don't!" Ricardo roared. He holstered one gun and sprinted. He moved like a linebacker, crashing into Velasquez just as the man reached the stairs. They hit the concrete hard, rolling over each other. Velasquez was younger, faster, but he was fighting for his life. Ricardo was fighting for his blood. Ricardo pinned him down, grabbing him by the lapels of his white suit. He headbutted him. Crack! Velasquez's nose shattered. Blood sprayed across the white linen. "You called me a dinosaur!" Ricardo shouted, slamming a fist into Velasquez's ribs. "You said I was weak! Please!" Velasquez sputtered, spitting teeth. "Please, I'll give you everything. The roots, the money, just let me go." Around them, the firefight was ending. Ricardo's men were professionals. They swept through the enemy positions with ruthless efficiency. Sophia was crouched behind the landing gear of the jet, holding her gun with two hands, scanning the area. She wasn't crying. She was covering her father. Ricardo stopped punching. He panted, staring down at the broken man beneath him. He pulled his gun and pressed the barrel against Velasquez's forehead. "You targeted my family," Ricardo whispered. "You used a child to bait me. You broke the rules." "Rules are for old men," Velasquez wheezed, trying to smile through the blood. "The world is changing, Ricardo. You can't stop it." "The world changes," Ricardo said, pulling the hammer back on the pistol. "But some things stay the same. You hunt the bull, you get the horns." "Mercy!" Velasquez screamed, his eyes squeezed shut. "Show me the mercy you showed the boy." Ricardo paused. He looked at his daughter. Safe. He looked at the sky. "That is the difference between us, Alejandro," Ricardo said softly. "The boy was innocent. You are just a disease." Bang! The shot echoed across the jungle. The birds took flight, a cloud of black wings rising against the sun. Ricardo stood up. He didn't look at the body. He wiped a speck of blood from his cheek. He felt heavy. Incredibly heavy. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind the ache in his old bones. He walked over to Sophia. She was still holding the gun, trembling slightly now that the danger was over. He gently took the weapon from her hands and engaged the safety. He pulled her into a hug, burying his face in her shoulder. "It's over," he whispered. "It's done." "I was scared, Papa," she admitted, her voice small. "I was so scared." "I know," Ricardo said. "Brave is not being unafraid. Brave is being scared and pulling the trigger anyway." Santos walked up, stepping over a body. He looked tired but satisfied. "The airfield is secure, patron. No survivors. The pilot surrendered. What do you want to do with the plane?" Ricardo looked at the sleek black jet. "Keep it. Paint it white. Sell it and give the money to the orphanage in the West District. I don't want his toys." "And the body?" Santos pointed to Velasquez. "Leave him for the vultures," Ricardo said. "Let the jungle have him. He wanted to be part of the food chain. Now he is." They walked back to the SUVs. The drive back to the city was quiet, but it wasn't the tense silence of before. It was the silence of survivors. The sun was setting now, casting long purple shadows over the mountains. "Where are we going?" Sophia asked, leaning her head on Ricardo's shoulder. "Home?" "Not yet," Ricardo said. "There is one more stop I have to make. I have to finish a conversation." The convoy wound its way back into the city, navigating the bustling streets of Medellin. The lights were coming on, a sea of glittering diamonds in the valley. They pulled up to the general hospital. Ricardo got out. He had changed his shirt again, putting on a fresh one he kept in the truck. He looked presentable. He looked like a businessman. He signaled for Sophia to follow him. "Why are we here?" she asked. To meet the reason we are alive, Ricardo said. They took the elevator to the fourth floor, the private wing. The guards outside the room snapped to attention. Ricardo nodded to them and pushed the door open. Maria was awake, sitting up in bed. She looked better. The color was returning to her cheeks. And sitting on the edge of the bed, eating a cup of gelatin, was Mateo. The boy looked up. His eyes went wide. "Mr. Monster!" Ricardo smiled. It was a genuine smile, one that reached his eyes. "Hello, Mateo." He stepped aside. "I want you to meet someone. Mateo, this is my daughter, Sophia." Sophia stepped forward. She looked at the little boy, then at the mother in the bed. She saw the bruises on Maria's face. She saw the fear and the hope in their eyes. She understood then. She understood why her father had risked everything. "Hi," Sophia said softly. Mateo looked at her. "Did the bad guys get you too?" Sophia nodded slowly. "They tried. But my papa stopped them." Mateo nodded sagely. "Yeah, he's really strong. He punched a guy for my mom." Ricardo walked over to the bed. He looked at Maria. "It is finished," he said simply. "The men who hurt you, the man who sent them, they are gone." Maria looked at him, searching his face for the truth. She found it. She let out a long, shuddering breath. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't," Ricardo said. "You live. You raised this boy to be a good man. That is enough." Ricardo turned to Mateo. "Mateo, I have a question for you." "Yeah?" the boy asked with a mouthful of green gelatin. "Do you like planes?" "I love planes," Mateo beamed. "I want to be a pilot." Ricardo chuckled. "Well, I just acquired a new jet. Maybe, when your mother is better, Sophia can take you to see it. Maybe you can sit in the cockpit." Mateo's jaw dropped. "For real?" "For real," Ricardo promised. He put his hand on Sophia's shoulder. "Come, mija, we should let them rest." They walked out of the room, leaving the mother and son in peace. They walked down the hallway, the grandfather and the daughter. Outside the hospital, the night air was cool. The city was noisy, chaotic, dangerous. It was a jungle of concrete and neon. Ricardo looked out at his kingdom. He knew there would always be wolves. He knew there would always be challengers like Velasquez, men who mistook kindness for weakness. But he also knew something else. He touched the pocket of his jacket, where he kept a photo of his family. "Papa," Sophia said, taking his arm. "Are you okay?" Ricardo looked at her. He looked at the stars above the city lights. He felt the weight of his sins, but tonight they felt a little lighter. "Yes," Ricardo said. "I am okay." He opened the car door for her. "What do we do now?" she asked. Ricardo smiled, the old wolf baring his teeth one last time. "Now?" he said. "Now we go get that steak I was promised." The door closed. The convoy pulled away, disappearing into the river of traffic. Just another set of headlights in the city of eternal spring. The bull had protected the herd. The debt was paid. And for tonight, at least, the monsters were afraid of the dark.